Ocean Calls.
Hello and welcome to Ocean Calls, the podcast in which we uncover the mysteries of the sea and explore solutions to some of the most pressing man-made issues on our blue planet. I'm your host, Euronews science reporter Jeremy Wilks. We've already hosted many Ocean Calls about the ways in which the best fisheries policy and sustainable aquaculture can help us take better care of the ocean. Check out our recent episode on seaweed farming, for example. But there's one crucial element we're still keen to hear more about: the men and women whose working lives are interwoven with the tides and waves of the sea. They're not exactly invisible, but their voices aren't always heard. And so we're setting out to set the record straight.
But these are small boats, colourful boats that you see right the way across Europe.
In this episode, we're talking about small-scale fisheries.
When you go on holiday, when you go to the coast, you'll see small boats in Europe of less than 12 metres. They generate huge benefits to those coastal communities. They usually, owner is on board, they do day trips, they land the freshest possible fish because they're only out for a few hours.
Some believe these boats and the communities that operate them are the answer to overfishing, as stewards of sustainable seafood production forming the cornerstone of coastal communities. It sounds idyllic, but is that really the case?
We provide around about 50% of employment, but we only have access to about 5% of fishing opportunities.
From tiny wooden vessels to those the size of a bus, these boats represent 80% of the fishing fleet in Europe. Despite their impressive numbers, this sector is in danger of disappearing, replaced by industrial vessels.
I can understand why, from an administrative perspective, it's much easier to deal with a smaller number of people in suits and ties who speak the same language, rather than this sort of disorderly, very numerous bunch of noisy, opinionated fishermen. But they deserve to be heard.
So let's listen to them as we dedicate this episode to the people working in small-scale fisheries, often overshadowed by their large-scale peers.
My name is Jeremy Percy, and I'm a very recently retired director of the new Under 10 Fishermen's Association, which was the only dedicated representative body for small-scale fishers in the UK. And I'm also still senior advisor to the Low Impact Fishers of Europe that represents thousands and thousands of small-scale fishers all the way across Europe.
Jerry was raised in a fishing village in Wales, and his career choice seemed like an obvious step when growing up.
Well, I started fishing back when the earth was young. I mean, your podcast people can't see me, but I'm not in the first flush of youth, I have to say. I was a boy fisherman in various parts of the UK. I fished all around the UK and Ireland with most sorts of gear over my years.
Very soon, a group of fishermen asked him to represent them in their local community in Wales.
And it grew from there, really, and there was an increasing recognition that we needed spokespeople. We needed people who could get up and talk to politicians and to ministers and to governments, etc. all around. And you might have gathered already, I'm not averse to chattering on about fishing, and I'm very committed to it.
That's how he ended up in an organisation called the Low Impact Fisheries of Europe, or LIFE, which was created in 2012. Today, it combines dozens of grassroots organisations from 15 European countries. Jerry's mission is to make sure that the 10,000 members of LIFE from Greece or France, Denmark or Bulgaria feel like someone has their back when dealing with administration.
We have made a very significant difference. Small-scale fishers are now on the map, and they're on the minds of governments and administrations. Doesn't necessarily mean we get much change in policy, but we are, generally speaking, I think, much more recognisable as an entity than we once were.
One of the main systemic issues the fishers from organisations like LIFE often highlight is the EU's common fisheries policy. Adopted in the 1980s, it established rules for the management of marine resources in the EU. It encouraged investments, increased employment in the sector, and saw industrial fleets ravage fish stocks. In 2014, the CFP was reformed, adding rules for sustainability and fairer distribution of resources. While Life welcomed many of the new rules, a decade on, the organisation believes that the reform failed to deliver.
The common fishery policy has generally failed. And guys now are more concerned about the lack of fish on the grounds than they are access to it. Now, how much of this is down to overfishing? How much of it is down to climate change? I mean, inshore waters tend to be shallower. Shallower waters warm up quicker than deeper offshore waters. The big boats offshore are doing very well at the moment, catch-wise. But we're suffering.
Hard working conditions, low wages, and the lack of fish closer to the shore drive young people away from their family businesses.
There's a vicious circle occurring at the moment where we are struggling for what they call generational renewal, attracting young people into the industry. So many of the knowledge and skills that small-scale inshore fishermen possess are being lost, and this is tradition and culture and just the ways of the sea. And you shouldn't underestimate just how long it takes to learn these. And once you've lost them, it's extremely difficult to get them back.
This also means that the face of European fishing villages is changing.
Fishing communities are being rent asunder, they're being split up. The attraction of coastal properties for second homes, for holiday homes, etc., has grown exponentially in the last few years. And fishing families that have been in the same community for literally centuries are being priced out and having to move away. We're in grave danger of becoming what I might call a picture postcard fleet. So you'll still have a few little colourful boats bobbing about there, but they're not really making any very significant contribution to the survival of those estates.
Small-scale fisheries can struggle, but Jerry believes that the only way to improve the situation is to make sure the fishers are heard.
We're facing an uphill struggle, but it is absolutely vital that the public get behind us and maintain the benefits that we bring, social and economic and environmental, to coastal communities.
Organisations like Life are part of the solution to making those benefits more widely appreciated. Another is to stimulate the kind of generational renewal that Jerry was talking about by generating renewed interest in an ancient craft, boat making. Let's listen to Thomas Højrup, a Danish ethnologist who's doing just that.
It's very wide. Its length is about 13 to 14 meters. And it can sail in very low water. The fishermen's crew are between 2 and 4 people, and they're fishing with the gillnet in the winter times and with the Danish seine in the summertime.
Thomas is describing a traditional Danish clinker-built boat. Clinker-built means that its hull has external planks which overlap downwards. It's a traditional technique adapted to the harsh sailing conditions of Denmark's northern coast. Here the currents are so strong that they constantly reshape the seabed and the shoreline, meaning ports and havens are few and far between, and the boats land directly on the sand.
So it's a very special kind of boat. It also has to be able to surf on a wave. When you are landing, you find a big wave and then you can surf upon it until you reach the land. So it demands that you have a very special shape in the hull.
So all along the coastline you can see landing beaches where the boats can be parked up when not in use.
And then they are very beautiful in the shape. You can see the shape because of the clinker-built planks. The fishermen and the boat builders are very concerned about this shape. Which boat is the most beautiful, and they talk a lot about that. And because they are standing on the beach, every people see them as an exhibition, so to speak, at the beach. So they are very much iconic.
They are iconic, but working in this world doesn't mean you have to suffer the elements like an ancient Viking. In fact, the young people who work in Danish small-scale fisheries have some handy modern tools to hand.
In the steerhouse, they have all what's possible of navigation, electronics. They are very modern, and all power on board is driven by hydraulics. So it's not a hard work to be on such a boat today.
Why is Thomas reviving these old Danish boat-building traditions? Because he wants to help rebuild small-scale fisheries that many feared were nearing extinction. Denmark is a large seafood producer and exporter. The industry contributes hundreds of millions of euros worth to the economy, and most of the fish is caught by large vessels offshore. The fishing community in Thorup Strand in northern Jutland is one of the few examples of small-scale fishing still surviving after Denmark privatised fishing quotas a decade ago, making them highly expensive for small operations and newcomers.
Yeah, it was a dramatic change because suddenly the quota was given for free to the owners of the boats. Then those people who are owning the boat, they're becoming millionaires, and the other ones are missing their right to get to the resources. It was a dramatic decrease of possibilities for the young generation.
To turn the tables in their favour, Thomas's association established a Fishers Guild to buy and distribute those quotas.
We had to replace the state as the owner, so to speak, the owner of the fishing rights locally. That made it possible to recruit the young people. Many other places, they have to be either children of rich people or to borrow a huge million in the banks to be able to buy quotas. And because of that, very, very few young people are going to do that.
The young people could buy quotas, but that didn't solve the issue of owning a boat. And that's where the old Danish craftsmanship traditions come into the story.
We had two very, very clever, very experienced elderly boat builders. And they began to educate a new generation of boat builders.
The association currently has approximately 400 active members, and the young people are very active in traditional boat building.
The young people who are educated into the boat building practice, they are super proud of it because the boat builders are themselves shaping the hull. It's a very qualified kind of handicraft where your creativity is the main source. And that is really a kind of practice that are able to engage the young people, girls as well as boys.
Thorup Strand found a way to save the small-scale fisheries and attract young people into the industry, but many of Europe's coastal communities still struggle. The average age of fishermen in Europe is rising. Only 10% of them are younger than 35. In France, for example, around half of the fishing workforce is over 50 years old. And because an overwhelming majority are family businesses, fishing isn't an easy business to get into, and it's hard for voices to be heard, especially those of women.
Even if we tend to think of fisheries as a male-dominated sector, you find women in all facets of the fishing sector, from helping to prepare boats and prepare nets to actually fishing themselves, going on board vessels of all sizes, to then also the post-harvest sector, cleaning catches, selling catches, processing catches, etc.
This is Anna Carlson, Fishery Officer for Livelihoods at the General Fisheries Commission for the Mediterranean and the Black Sea regions at the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN. One of her aims is to study the role of women in fisheries and offer advice on improving their working conditions. The quality of data is quite poor, but the FAO estimates that women represent about 28% of the workforce in European fisheries. Most of them work on the shore, doing accounting for their fisher husbands, for example. Only 3% of women work on board vessels.
There are a number of barriers for women in the sector. You have to have capital, you have to have perhaps a loan or funds to purchase a vessel, purchase a license, start your own enterprise. And often that access to financial resources is more limited for women in general across the board, not just in the fisheries sector.
And then there's the mental load.
Many women, even if they are fishing and actively engaged in the sector, in any case have family at home, children at home that they have to take care of. They can't go out at sea for a month at a time.
In a recent report, the FAO gives several recommendations to make women more visible in fisheries and to provide them with fairer access to resources. First, there need to be better ways of collecting data, ensuring it's divided by gender. The data is needed to make the role of women clearer for communities and decision makers. What's more, it's important to ensure that the measures that are taken also account for the limitations that women face.
Maybe a woman fisher cannot travel to attend a training, and so bringing a training to a location that is more convenient at them or more compatible with their household duties. Also working on financial inclusion for women, making sure that women have access to relevant equipment. So sometimes it's very simple, very silly things, but for example, the height of the sorting table on board a fishing vessel may not be at a proper height that is healthy for a woman to be working at.
To Anna, making women in the fisheries visible is crucial for the sector.
So it's not necessarily an issue of trying to ensure that 50% of the workforce in fisheries are women. It's a question of trying to ensure that if women want to participate in the sector, they have equal opportunities. And at the same time, ensuring that those that are already working in the sector are given their due credit, are not facing certain challenges that their male colleagues do not face, to ensure that they're given equal rights and equal opportunities.
So efforts are underway to make sure the women in fishing are heard. Women like the one we'll hear from next.
Yo soy Concha Ramallo.
I'm Concha Ramallo.
Soy percebeira en Aguiño, Ribeira, España.
I'm a barnacle picker from Ribera in Spain.
Ribeira is a picturesque coastal town overlooking the Atlantic Ocean in Galicia. Many local men, who are more likely to own a boat, earn their living by fishing. The women often stay ashore to collect percebes, or gooseneck barnacles. It might sound easy, but these animals, which look like little dinosaur fingers and taste delicious, I can tell you, grow on rocky cliffs all along this rugged coastline. And they are notoriously hard to collect.
El trabajo de la percebeira es duro. El día de trabajo, pues, depende también del tiempo, ¿sabes?
Picking barnacles is hard work because it depends on the weather.
La lluvia no nos afecta.
The rain doesn't affect us much.
Lo que más nos afecta son los temporales, las olas, los metros de las olas.
What affects us most are the storms, the waves, especially if they're high.
Y el viento.
And the wind.
Mucho viento.
This part of the coast is known for its tricky tides.
Tiene que ser todo muy rápido.
You have to be very fast.
La marea.
When the tide goes down, you have 2 hours. One before the tide retreats, and one when the tide starts to return.
When confronted by wind and waves, it's easy to lose balance, so many barnacle pickers wear helmets in case they slip, and that's not all.
Pues tienes que...
You have to dress appropriately. I wear a wetsuit that's like a diving suit, but thicker. And then I have a tool that we call a raspa to collect barnacles. How can I explain it? It's like a screwdriver, but very wide. You know, it has a very sharp tip.
Each barnacle picker has to operate their raspa with agility and grace.
You have to remove the barnacle carefully so you don't break it or sting it. Otherwise, it's worth nothing.
Percebes are a delicacy in Spanish cuisine, highly sought after for their unique flavour and texture. On average, a kilo of this seafood costs around €200. With her licence, Concha has a 5-kilo limit.
The buyers always think it's too expensive. But they don't consider the effort and risk involved. They should see what it takes.
Despite challenges, Concha loves her job and is proud to contribute to this Spanish tradition.
I don't know. I pick the barnacles and then take them to the fish market and sell them at the best price. It's satisfying at the same time. You pick them at your own pace. The better ones you pick, the better the price. There are no tricks.
There are no tricks, just hard work. A great lesson in life there from the last of our featured voices in this episode of Ocean Calls, focusing on the folk you seldom see or hear from in the world of fishing. And now to the part of the podcast in which a well-known person tells us their favourite tale of the sea. Meet Jasmine Harrison, a British adventurer with a couple of world records on her mantelpiece. Today, she'll tell us the story of making an unusual friend while swimming the full length of the British Isles from Land's End to John O'Groats in 2022.
My name is Jasmine Harrison and I'm an adventurer. The experience that I want to share is about swimming the length of the UK, and whilst I was up in Scotland, I had a whale swimming with me. This whale would do flips in front of me and was just swimming alongside quite a bit. It was amazing, but also really annoying because it was distracting and I needed to keep swimming. But it was also absolutely terrifying because I didn't know why this whale was swimming around me, swimming underneath of me. And when it did it at night time, that was absolutely petrifying, and I've never been so scared in my entire life, to the point that I wanted to get out of the water. I wanted to scream. Because having this massive whale go underneath you, not actually knowing what kind of whale it was, or at that point if it was the same one that had been there during the day, it could have been an orca, was just, very scary, completely in the dark. And just being able to see this basically huge white bed sheet come underneath you at night, lit up by the moon and bioluminescence, it was just huge, like at least 20 foot long. Yeah, I think it was a minke whale, but just massive compared to me that's in the water, and I was scared that it might think I was a seal and therefore want to, play, maybe, but it's definitely really, really strange. So he disappeared after a few moments, but it was just me then very on edge at night time, holding onto my support kayak, just looking up to the sky, just kind of hyperventilating, really panicking. And then I just knew that I had to keep on swimming, get my head down again, keep on swimming. But anything else then just completely made me jump. So I had then a pod of dolphins came underneath me in the dark, which they often did, but I was so on edge that I just screamed. That was it. I did not want to be in the water anymore, especially then when seaweed touched me. I was swimming and I hit some seaweed. Completely freaked out, hated it, and I couldn't wait for that shift of swimming to be over so I could get back on my support boat and go to bed.
Well, our thanks to Jasmine Harrison for that spellbinding ocean tale. You're listening to Ocean Calls, a bi-monthly podcast for Friends of the Sea in which we break down science and share interesting ocean facts. If you like this episode and you want to learn more, go to the Euronews YouTube channel and listen to a longer version of this conversation. To find out more about our guests and their work, check the links in the description. I'm your host, Jeremy Wilkes, and this show is produced by Naira Davlasian and Natalia Olsner. The sound editing is by Jean-Christophe Marco, and the sound mixing is by Mathieu Duchesne. Our editor-in-chief is Sophie Claudet. Ocean Calls is produced in partnership with the European Commission's Directorate General for Maritime Affairs and Fisheries.
Ocean Calls.